Welcome everyone to our 12th class in this series, studying about Bnei Noach from the S'dei Chemed, the halakhic encyclopedia of Jewish law, and we are in the standard version, volume Ches 8, page Aleph Tov Reish Yud, which is the page opposite 3218, which would then be 3219. In the middle of the right-hand column, where you have the new paragraph with the big word ve'al. So we're in the middle, actually, of this particular part of this discussion. And the discussion here is whether halacka, which basically is a Jewish legal concept of an assumption or a strong presumption that until proven otherwise, we accept it as absolute fact. And that has many ramifications. So the question is, how? First of all, does it apply to Bnei Noach, and exactly how? And also the concept of safek, which is related. Safek means a doubt. So sometimes in Jewish law, if something is beyond reasonable doubt, or if it is more or less 50-50, so how do we rule in a case where we have a doubt? And it comes up in many, many cases. Classically, it would be in dietary laws of kashrus, of what we can eat, if there's something which mixed in or might have gotten mixed in, etc. So the question is, how does this apply to Bnei Noach, if at all? And also, we have many rules as they apply to the Jewish people. Jewish law is de'oraisa, biblical. And then you have many rules and laws which are rabbinic, which were instituted, which were made up by the rabbis as a safeguard, as a protection. So if it's biblical, then we need to establish, do they apply to Bnei Noach, to the non-Jew, or do they not? And if they do apply, then what about the extension or the rabbinic decree? That presumably would not apply to the Bnei Noach, unless we know clearly that the rabbis did make this decree for some reason for the Bnei Noach. All right, so let us begin. V'al shekosav hagoin, and that which the above-mentioned genius, great sage, wrote, Degam chazaka mahani leben Noach, that chazaka does work for a ben Noach, that there is such a concept of a chazaka. He's not going to discuss this yet, but he's not going to discuss it, but let me just throw it out there to give you an example. There is a clear prohibition. It's a negative commandment, and then also a positive commandment as far as the relationship, the attitude, the behavior of a person towards their parents. So let's say towards the father. So in Jewish law, one of the 10 commandments is to honor father and mother. And there's another commandment, one of the 613, not in the 10 commandments, to fear or revere mother and father. There's a commandment against cursing a father or mother. There is a commandment against striking a father or mother, and that the person would only, and it's actually a capital offense, but it's only if they actually wounded them and made them bleed. Now, Mother, granted, we could know for certain who a person's mother is. There can be witnesses that saw the birth, and we know how to track that this is the child that was actually the infant. But a father, let's go back before we knew about DNA. The father, you could never know with absolute certainty who the father is. So the whole concept of a relationship of a child to a father, whether it's law of inheritance, that the son inherits the father, whether it's honoring parent, whether it's the capital offense of striking a father, that's all based on chazaka. It's a very strong assumption. That's all it is. It's an assumption. But that's called a chazaka. And based on that, the person could be put to death. Now, question is, what about Bnei Noach? So, if part of the 7 Noachite commandments include, either in a positive sense, honoring father, or in the negative, not being permitted to strike the father, and if that would actually be punishable for the Ben Noach, well, there you have a classic example of relying on chazaka for a Ben Noach, because you don't know for sure that that's his father. That would be an example of chazaka. All right, so now, he says that chazaka does work for Ben Noach. Lo yeshiv mar nechtoi al dvarav. So his grandson that we mentioned in the previous class, just a few lines above in the end of the previous paragraph, he did not respond to that. Kanire, so seemingly, shemoide loy, that he actually admits, he agrees with him. Amnam hagoyin maloi haroim b'mareches ben Noach. However, there's a different sage, the author of Meloi Haroyim. He, on the other hand, nistapik bazeh im noimar dahadu mukminan achazaka galulan kra miviyatza akoyin min abayis. Do we in fact say that when there is a doubt, we rely on the chazaka? Because in a case of a doubt, how do we know? What's the biblical source to rely on a chazaka? So the verse in Scripture, in the Torah, reveals this to us. Miviyatza akoyin min abayis, from a verse in Vayikra, in Leviticus, chapter 14, verse 38, in the Torah portion of Mitzayra. There it's talking about tzaras of a house. Very briefly, tzaras, which we don't really have a way to translate it. Many translate it as leprosy, but it's some unnatural, abnormal, generally skin disease, discoloration. That's why they translate it as leprosy, but it's not. And in ancient times, in the times of the temple or the times of the Torah in the wilderness, in the desert, one can get that affliction on their skin, or it could be on the garment, or on the wall of the house. So this particular section is speaking about, and you don't know, you have to call the expert, and it's got to be a kohen, a priest. He has to determine whether it's pure or whether it's impure. And oftentimes, it's uncertain at the first time, so he has to tell the person to be in seclusion, or the garment, or the house for 1 week, and then he re-examines it. Now, if the kohen is not an expert, so he brings a non-kohen expert, but the kohen has to be the one to verbally say, and only then does it become pure or impure. He has to be the one to declare the verdict. Now, if someone sees something like this on their house, on the wall of their house, and they're not sure, so they call the kohen. So the verses here tell us that the kohen comes to the house, and the person, the owner of the house, should say, kinega, like an affliction, I saw in the house. No, don't say anything definitive. Say, it looks to me like an affliction. And then the kohen should instruct them to empty out the house before he arrives, before the kohen looks at it. The guy came to the kohen and he tells him, you need to come take a look at my house because it looks like I may have this saras. So the kohen, before he gets there, he says, empty out the house so that the vessels do not become defiled. And afterwards, the kohen walks in and he examines the color of the walls. And then the verse says, V'yatza kohen min habayis. The kohen walks out of the house to the entrance, right outside the house. And the house is to be closed off for 7 days. And then he comes back on the 7th day and he takes a look. And then he can determine what it is. So the question is, what's the point of having everything come out? What happens if it's impure? So we say no. Until the kohen sees it, it's only a doubt. We don't know for a fact what it is. So here the Torah is revealing to us that when in doubt, you don't necessarily assume that it's no good. It's still a doubt, so therefore at that point you can still save all of the various vessels, the furniture, and what have you, and take it out of the house. Now that verse is clearly speaking, that is speaking only for Jews, not for Bnei Noach. So there you have, that biblically, we only have a source for this for Jews, not for Bnei Noach. The Kosav, and he wrote, that in his explanation to the section of the Code of Jewish Law, he writes, Kosav, that according to what he explains, when it comes to the discussion, his section about chazaka, whether we follow it if it's an equal doubt, if it's 50-50, both sides. So then do we go by the assumption that since until now it was such, therefore that outweighs the other side? That's his discussion there. So in that section he says, De'echa de safeku, safek misa. If the doubt is a death penalty doubt, if that's the doubt, it's such a case which is possible death, lo yazlinu basar chazaka. We don't go after the chazaka. We don't say that, well, until now it was so-and-so, and now we have a 50-50 doubt, so we're going to go with the chazaka. No, you don't say that if that would be a death penalty. Now when it comes to Bnei Noach, we know that basically every one of the 7 mitzvahs Bnei Noach is a capital offense. It's the death penalty for a transgression of any one of the 7. And in their case, the warning, that is the punishment. Just by mere fact that the Torah says that you're not allowed to do such and such, that itself is already telling you that if you do, it's a death penalty. Therefore, by Bnei Noach, in any case, anything which is forbidden for Bnei Noach, Favei Sofik Misa. So that would be a doubt of a death penalty case. So by the Jew, if it's 50-50, you go by the chazaka as long as it's not a death penalty question. Let's say it would just be a punishment of getting 39 lashes. So then you rely on the chazaka. But by the Ben Noach, there's no such thing. Everything that's a doubt is a doubt of a death penalty. Therefore, chazaka would not work like that. Ach be'emes, however, in truth, kan lo shayich zeh. Here, this is not relevant. That which we say, that if it's a doubt in a death penalty case, that you don't follow the chazaka, hurak mitrabanan. That rule is only rabbinic. The fact that for a Jew, if it's a 50-50 chance that you have a chazaka, you don't rely on the halakka if it's a death penalty. That's only rabbinically speaking. On a biblical level, you would go by the halakka, and it would be permitted or whatever. It's only rabbinic. And therefore, when the rabbis instituted this rule, it's only for us Jews that they were strict and said not to follow the chazakah. Not for the Bnei Noach. So therefore, by a Ben Noach, you could rely on a chazakah, even though every case for a Ben Noach is a possible death penalty. That doesn't matter, because that whole rule is only rabbinic, and we don't find that the rabbis instituted that stringency for the Ben Noach. V'sham kasavnu Shapir, and over there we wrote the Mistama Ashvatim Michmiru al Atzmam, that with regards to the original 12 sons of Jacob, the 12 tribes, they probably were strict on themselves when we find that they did follow such a rule and they did not rely on a chazakah. So it's probably because they were just being extra strict on themselves. But this is not the case for us to forbid on all the other Bnei Noach, on all of mankind. We don't have any proof to be so strict with them. Ad kan l'shoinoi, up to here is the quote of what he said. However, at the end, says the S'dei Chemed, the author here, however, he did not reveal his opinion to which way he's leaning when it comes to the concept of something being nullified in a majority. We spoke at length in previous classes about Bitul beroiv. Bitul means nullified, and roiv is the majority. So if you have 2 eggs, let's say, that are kosher, they're edible, 1 egg that is not, and they got mixed in together, and there is no way to identify by looks or by smell or by taste, there's no way to identify it, so then we say that the minority is non-existent in the majority. That's the concept of Bitul beroiv. We mentioned last time that the place that we really learned this from is with regards to judges, that you have to go by the majority, and if you have, let's say, 3 judges judging a particular case, and 2 of them say one thing, and 1 of them says differently, that it's the entire court which has ruled like the 2. It no longer is 2 against 1, but it became an entity of this court ruled such and such, because we follow the majority, and the minority is non-existent, so to say. So, what do we say about Bnei Noach? It's not clear what he holds with regards to Bnei Noach, whether we do apply this rule of Bitul beroiv, of something being nullified in the majority, or not. Next paragraph. And that which they are arguing, the author of Nachlas Yaakov with the one asking the question, if also, according to those that hold, that which we are being strict when we have doubts is biblical, because that itself is a question. When there's a doubt, we say be strict. Is that a biblical obligation and rule, or is that a rabbinic rule? Yesh loymar, we can say, that this is not said about a ben noach. That you don't have to be strict. So I already wrote above that which the Maramshik says, Shenire, that appears, only according to the opinion that says that being strict is a rabbinic ruling, that they're the ones that say that when you're in doubt you should be strict. Only according to that opinion do we say to be ben noach mutar, that for a ben noach it's permissible and you don't have to be strict. Even if the prohibition has been established. So for a Jew, if there is a doubt, a biblical doubt, meaning a doubt whether something is biblically forbidden or not, we have to be strict. We have to be strict. If there is a doubt as to whether this is biblically permitted or biblically forbidden, we have to be strict and say forbidden because we don't know. That rule may be a rabbinic rule, because before the rabbis made that ruling, biblically speaking, if you have a doubt, you could be lenient. I mean, a lot of details depends how much of a doubt, but if you have a doubt, you don't know that it's for sure forbidden, so then it's permitted. But the rabbi said no. But they never said that it doesn't apply to a ben noyach. So since the whole point of being strict when you have a doubt is rabbinic, therefore it does not apply to a ben noyach. So if a ben noyach has a doubt as to whether something is forbidden or permitted for him, it would seemingly be permitted. V'gam evesi sham, and I also brought down over there divrei hagoyim pri megadim, the words of the great Pri Megadim, commentator on the Code of Jewish Law, shegam chomer asfeika is min haTorah, that he actually holds that being strict when you have a doubt is biblical. It's not a rabbinic edict or decree, but it's actually a biblical obligation that if you're in doubt in a biblical law, you have to be strict. Even according to that, yesh loymar, we can say the suffix mutar ben noyach. You could still say that in a case of a doubt for a ben noyach, it's still permitted. Uledivrei hakoil, according to all opinions, whether you hold that for a Jew, when there's a biblical doubt, you need to be strict, and that's a biblical rule or a rabbinic rule, any way you look at it. Im chomer asfeika isum rabbanon, if being strict is rabbinic, lo nesar suffix libnei noyach. So then, a doubt is not forbidden for bnei noyach. Amnam agoyin moloy haroyim b'mareches ben noyach ois chaf beis. However, this moloy haroyim, which we mentioned before, so this genius, the moloy haroyim, in his section of bnei noyach, he says, the gam la soivrim, the chomer asfeikis midrabanan, that even according to those that hold that for a Jew, being strict when you have a doubt is only rabbinic, yesh loymar de ben noyach asur, he says that for a ben noyach it is forbidden and you need to be strict. Shekasa beis chaf beis v'zel hashoyna, because this is what he writes, and we quote. This is quoting the moloy haroyim. Nistapakti, I was in doubt. Besafik Yisrael ben noyach, when there is a doubt for a prohibition for a ben noyach. I asur oiloi, whether it's forbidden or not. He says originally I was in doubt. I wasn't sure. When you have something which is a doubt as to whether it's forbidden for a ben noyach, so does the ben noyach need to be strict and behave as if it's forbidden, or can he be lenient and behave as if it is permitted? V'hinei, and behold, l'das hasoivrim, according to the opinion of those that maintain, sfeika midrabanan asur, that a doubt is rabbinically forbidden, v'hidas harambam v'sayatoi, and that is indeed the opinion of Maimonides and the others that go along with the Maimonides, that they hold that for a Jew, something which is a doubt as to whether it is forbidden or not is rabbinically forbidden. It seemingly, apparently, seemed, very simply put, the ben noyach mutar, that for a ben noyach it's permitted. Because even for a Jew, it's really it's biblically permitted. It's only rabbinically forbidden for the Jew. Okay, so the ben noyach just, he goes according to the biblical law because the rabbis didn't make any additional restriction on him. So it would be permitted for the ben noyach. It's just that the sages, the rabbis, made it forbidden. Aflafi agirsa beramsham, and then there's a different version of how to read it over there. the Safik Kares Umisa, Safik Minator Lahachmir. That in Maimonides, Ilchas Tumas Meis, in the laws of the defilement of a dead body, so over there, if there's a doubt in a case of a kares prohibition, kares is, for a Jew, a number of severe sins. If the person committed them intentionally, however, there weren't two proper kosher witnesses with a proper warning, so technically the person is not put to death, but they did commit the sin intentionally, then it would be a chiyuv, an obligation of kares, which is that the soul gets cut off spiritually. And in the times of the temple, the person was guaranteed to die at a young age. So if it's a case of kares, umisa, or death, safik minatera lahachmir, so then biblically you have to be strict. So in such a case, yesh loimar, we can say the cave in the ben noyach hazar elson umisa asan, since by the non-Jew, by the ben noyach, every case is the death penalty. Im kain have safik isra misa. So that means to say that in every case of a doubt by a ben noyach is in fact a doubt as to whether they are obligated, whether they're liable for death, and therefore every case would be you'd have to be strict and forbid it if you have a doubt. Ibra lefimasha kosva mefarshim, according to what the commentators wrote, the time shel haram, that the reason of Maimonides mishum degali rachmana lo yove mamzer v'chulu. That's because Hashem has revealed in the Torah when he states that a mamzer is not allowed to enter the Jewish community, which basically means a mamzer would be a bastard. But what does that mean in Jewish law? That is a child who is a product of not only a forbidden union, a forbidden marriage, but that the prohibition of the parents' union is a capital offense. So if it's just, let's say, out of wedlock, that's not a mamzer. So it has to be that the penalty for the relations of the father and mother in that case is a capital offense. So even if it was done accidentally, and therefore there is no death penalty, but still the product, the child, is a mamzer. That mamzer is not allowed to marry any regular Jew. Okay, the mamzer is Jewish if the mother is Jewish, but the mamzer cannot marry into the Jewish community. Now that's how the verse states it. Hasafek, from that we learn out, but if it's a doubt if he's a mamzer, we don't know with certainty that he is actually a mamzer. Yavoy, then he could come into the Jewish community. He could marry a regular, kosher Jewish woman. So from there, he came out to be lenient when you have a doubt as far as a prohibition is concerned. The Galilon Kra, for this verse is revealing to us that it's only if it's a definite mamzer, from the wording in the verse, loyove mamzer, which means if you have an individual where we're not sure, we have reason to doubt that the father is the legitimate father, and it may be that it was an illegitimate father, someone else. Let's say this was a married woman, and we have reason to doubt that it's not her husband who fathered the son, but someone else. But we don't know with certainty. That's called a safek mamzer, because she's married at the time, and if anyone besides her husband is the father of the child while she was married to that man, it's a mamzer. We don't know though. And yet, such a child is allowed to marry a Jewish woman. Im kain, if so, yesh loymar, we then can say, the leven noyach, the loy galikra, that when it comes to a ben noyach, where we don't have any such verse that reveals to us that a doubt is all right, Sfeikoi asur. That means that a doubt by a ben noyach would be forbidden. That if there's a prohibition for a ben noyach, but we're not sure if it's actually prohibited in that case, we have to be strict. Because we don't have this verse as we do for the Jew to be lenient. From the fact that the Torah, so to say, needed to reveal to us, in the case of the Jew, that it is permitted. Michlal, from this we can deduce that logically speaking, if not for the verse, logically it would be forbidden. It's only because of the verse that it says that lo yove mamzer bikal Hashem. But without that verse, if you leave it up to common sense, up to logic, if you have a doubt as to whether something is permitted or forbidden, better safe than sorry, and you have to treat it strictly. Okay, so since for the Ben Noach we don't have a verse, therefore what do we have to rely on? Common sense, logic. It's only for the Jew because the Torah is giving us this special particular verse to teach us that we're being lenient if it's a doubt. V'im kain, leben noach dulegali nisharu b'isuran, and therefore for the ben noach they remain in their forbidden state. Surely, according to those, not Maimonides, the others that hold that if you are in doubt, then biblically it's forbidden, not just rabbinically. Then for sure a doubt for a ben noach would be forbidden. Okay, so at this point, it seems that he is going to the direction that if there's a doubt as to whether something is forbidden or permitted for a ben noyach, we have to be strict, even in cases where for the Jew, you would be allowed to be lenient. So, practically speaking, what comes out at this point is, let's say, there is food, there's meat, which there is a doubt, a reasonable doubt, as to whether it is Eiver min hachai or not. If you know for sure, there's no discussion. It's forbidden for any ben noach to eat. If you know for sure that it's not Eiver min hachai, wasn't taken off of a living creature, then there's no doubt that the ben noach is allowed to eat it. No question. But if you have a case where it's a doubt, you don't know. So what he's saying now is the ben noach has to be strict, even in a theoretical case where that level of doubt would be permitted for the Jew. If a Jew had a piece of meat where it was doubtful whether it was kosher meat or not kosher meat, and taking everything into consideration, all the factors, the Jew would be allowed to eat it. There are such cases. If you make the exact same case for the non-Jew with regards to his kosher, non-kosher, his Eiver min hachai, do not compare it to the Jewish case. The Jew you could be lenient with, and the non-Jew never. Always have to be strict whenever there's a doubt. That's what it seems like here. Last 3 lines on the right-hand column. V'chokar harav Chaim David huva b'shaylos v'tshuvas minchas Moshe liyedidi agoyin avbezdin kilas kaminka yishmem tzrim v'chazkem v'chelek yeridei siman aleph v'dina mevur b'yeridei siman yudalit. Okay, so he says, then there's another person, another rabbi, who he was questioning, and it's brought down, and he says it's actually a friend of the S'dei Chemed, a friend of his who's a great rabbi, brings this down. And that is, in the Code of Jewish Law, in the section which deals with linyan Eiver hayoytze me'abehema, the limb, or the part of the animal, which came out from the animal, dasr lishtois mimenu hacholov, that you're not allowed to drink the milk from that. The kosvu hapoiskim, and the codifiers, they wrote, shimyesh shishim ba'behema negedo eiver, that if there is 60 times more than that limb, which is the problematic limb, if out of the entire animal there's at least 60 times more, the ratio, mutar acholov, then the milk is permissible. Because for a Jew to drink milk, it has to be milk which came from a kosher animal. In other words, a Jew cannot drink milk that's not from a kosher animal. In other words, any animal that, if slaughtered and is made kosher and everything, can be eaten. So the same thing is with the milk. You can only drink milk from a kosher animal. So the problem here is part of the animal is forbidden to be eaten. So we say if there's 60 times of the kosher animal against it, so then it would be fine. V'chakar lefidasa poiskim, and what he's questioning over here is that according to the codifiers, the Bitul isur, that when it comes to nullifying a prohibition, af heicha deika shishim, even in a case where there is 60, ika kfela tzarich l'hatimoy la kfela, that if there is a non-Jew, you need to let him taste it. In other words, the whole concept of 60 is, we learn out that that's when the taste will no longer be there. So you can only deal with that basically when there's no other way to determine it. So then we go by 60 versus 1. But if you have someone who can actually taste it and tell you whether it will have the taste, you need to do that. And if this non-Jew who is allowed to drink it says that it does indeed have a taste, asr, then it's forbidden. Ubal karchin, and we must say, hainu mishum derak roiv pa'amim ein tam b'shishim. So we have to say like this: when it comes to the this ratio of 60 times against something, that then it becomes nullified. It's only that most of the time, it's not a guarantee that every time it won't have a taste. So, for example, you're cooking together meat, and there are 60 pieces, 60 ounces of kosher meat. And somewhere in it, there's 1 piece, 1 ounce of non-kosher meat. So, in that case, theoretically, everything is good. It's kosher. Because we say the 1 piece won't give a taste to all the other pieces. You won't taste it. Or for that matter, if a little bit of milk fell into meat, because for a Jew, milk and meat are forbidden to be cooked together, forbidden to be eaten together. So if there was at least 60 times meat against the milk, then the milk will be totally dissolved and won't give a taste to the meat, and you won't have any milky taste to the meat. That's only most of the time. There's no guarantee, because if there would be a guarantee, why do you have to give it to someone to taste? We're saying if you could, you need to give it to someone who's allowed to eat it, let him taste it. It's only if it's not possible, either because it's meat and they have the same taste, so he can't taste the difference, or there's nobody there who can really taste it. So we see here that it's only most of the time. Avol b'miyut, but sometimes, in a minority of the cases, yesh tam, there is a taste, even when you have 60 times against the forbidden element. And if so, according to what the Pri Megadim, again, this commentator on the Code of Jewish Law, what he wrote in the Code of Law, that by a Ben Noach we don't go by the majority. There's no such rule as majority by a Ben Noach. So in this particular case of this milk that the Jew has to be strict and not drink, would be forbidden for him to sell to the Ben Noach. Even if there's 60 times of the animal against that 1 limb of the animal, which is not acceptable. Why? Why can't I sell it to a non-Jew? Because maybe in this milk there is a little bit of a taste of that limb, which is forbidden. And what's the problem with that limb? That limb is Eiver Min HaChai. That's the problem. So it's not only forbidden for a Jew, it's forbidden for the non-Jew as well. that he did not become permitted by his mother's slaughtering. See, the case over here is that if a mother animal was slaughtered and you found inside an animal the fetus, the mother's baby becomes permitted without slaughtering it, because you slaughtered the mother. However, what happens if one limb was sticking out at the time that you slaughtered the animal? In other words, the animal stuck one of its feet out of the womb, and in that position you slaughtered the mother. So the rest of the animal is kosher. That limb is not. And that limb is considered Eiver Min HaChai. So a Ben Noach can't have it either. So we say as long as the rest of the animal has 60 times, it's fine. But for the Ben Noach, 60 times shouldn't work, because it's only most of the time that 60 times means that there's not going to be the foul taste, the forbidden taste, I should say. Whereas by the Ben Noach, we don't go by the majority. So since there is a chance that this milk will have a taste of the forbidden limb, so me, the Jew, should be forbidden to sell this milk to a non-Jew. And so it appears, according to the Prima Gadim, actually, not just theoretically, but in actual law. And he actually submitted this question, and take a look there and see what he responded. And I see the linyan dina, that as far as the actual law is concerned, you don't have to be in doubt. No problem here. Because two of the leaders of the generation, two of the greatest sages of the generation, the outstanding geniuses, Chasam Sofer v'Shoelu Meishiv. These are two of the greatest rabbis, and they were living in the times of the S'dei Chemed. Kasvu b'pshitus. They wrote very simply, that even if we say that the concept of something becoming nullified in the majority, that the minority is no longer there, even if we say that that does not apply to Bnei Noach, Mikol Mokim, nonetheless, belach, when it's two things which are moist. See, we have different types of mixtures. So if it's two wet things, two moist things, then it's as if it doesn't exist. See, there's different ways of viewing when something doesn't exist. If you have 3 eggs, 3 hard-boiled eggs, so it's a mixture, but you know that one of them is no good and 2 of them are good, so we can say, well, you go by the majority and they become good, or whatever. Okay, you could take one out and then assume that those 2 are the 2 good ones, but they didn't actually physically get mixed. But when you have a mixture of something cooking on a fire and it got mixed, that is scientifically now physically mixed together. So there it really does lose its entity, the minority, and it's as if it doesn't exist. And therefore, Gam ben Noach Mahani. Therefore, they say that even by Ben Noach it does apply. That applies. Even if we say that the concept of Bitul does not apply by Ben Noach, but when it comes to lach belach, something wet and something wet, there it does apply. Because it's like, it's a scientific fact. V'nil ve'imam bisvara zu hagoyin maramshik. And who goes along with the 2 of them as well would be the understanding of the maramshik. V'achut ha'meshulash lo yinatek. So then the S'dei Chemed uses an interesting expression. It's actually a verse, and it says that the triple cord will not be severed, will not be broken. So since we have these three giants of our generation, the Chassam Sofer, the Shoyelu Meshiv, and in addition the Maharam Shik, the three of them, they all say the same thing, therefore, no questions, and he says, I have no doubts, therefore, that it would be fine. The words of the Maharam Shik and the Chassam Sofer are brought earlier, in the beginning paragraph, Venira de Lafi, V'divrei Shoyelu Meshiv heim b'mahadura hey siman pevav hevesim liel b'dibraskel v'sham b'siman pevav. He said I brought those down as well. So he's just telling us that he brought down all three of these opinions. And that's why he says we could be lenient, and it would be permissible for a ben noach to drink that milk as well. And we don't have to be concerned that maybe it actually has a taste of the non-kosher part of the animal. Okay, let's do one more paragraph because that will bring us up to the next section. So we're on the left-hand side, beginning of the paragraph Uvemai. Uvemai the Kaimolon, and in that which we establish as follows. Hayu loy banim begayusoy, v'niskayer, kiyem pirya v'rivya. Now, there's a mitzvah, the first of the 613 for the Jewish people, first mitzvah in the Torah, be fruitful and multiply, to have children. Okay? A man, a non-Jewish man, a ben noach, a goy, he fathered children when he wasn't Jewish. Okay? He has sons, he has daughters, and then he converted. He became a Jew. He fulfilled the mitzvah of perufu. He fulfilled the mitzvah of having children. Chakar, now in this subject matter, Chakar harav Tzvi David. So there's a rabbi who was inquiring, he was analyzing. Huvu dvar b'sefer shalas v'tshuvas liyedidi hagoyin av bezdin kilas nijnov ish mitzvim v'chaskem simin chavtes ois gimel. And it's brought down in the responsa of my good friend, another great rabbi. Why did he fulfill this mitzvah of having children when he was a non-Jew? We have a rule. Our sages tell us that a convert, someone who becomes Jewish, is like a newborn child. Life begins for him at that moment that he went through the conversion. He's like a newborn baby. And his non-Jewish children, which are biologically his children, are not his children by Jewish law. They're not Jewish. They're not his. So why did he fulfill the mitzvah of having children? Val karchin, so we must say, hatam, the reason, mishum deika, sheves, because there is the concept of sheves, meaning a non-Jew has an obligation to have children. It's not one of the seven. So we've discussed on other classes that there are many more, so to say, obligations or responsibilities or offshoots, and they're not just seven. We spoke about charity, education. So one of the main points of creation of human beings is to be procreative, and it's based on a verse that says, "Loi toyu b'ro l'sheves yitzara," that the world was not created for chaos, but rather to make it an inhabited world. So therefore, everybody, non-Jews, have a responsibility of sheves, of having children to make this world populated and civilized. So since, when he was not Jewish, it's not like he had nothing to do with the mitzvah of having children, nothing at all, and now he became Jewish. So why are those children, which are not his, why are they? No, because there is the concept of sheves, and he did physically bring children into the world, therefore, now he became Jewish, it's good enough. Those non-Jewish children, he fulfilled his mitzvah. Gam yesh loymar, furthermore, how can he fulfill the mitzvah of having children? Maybe he's not the father of those children, as we mentioned earlier in the beginning of today's class. A father is only a father by chazaka. We only assume that he's the father, as is always the case by Jew and non-Jew alike. So how did he fulfill the mitzvah of his non-Jewish children that he fathered when he was a non-Jew? Maybe they're not his children. And by a non-Jew, we don't go after the majority. By a Jew, we say, look, let's go after the majority. So majority of husbands are the fathers of their children. But by a non-Jew, you don't go after the majority. So you can't rely on that. So how did he fulfill the mitzvah? For a Jew, it's not a problem. We go by the chazaka, by the roiv, by the majority, by the assumption. But by non-Jews, we don't do that. We have to know absolute. So how did he fulfill the mitzvah? So the response that he got was, when he's not Jewish, before he converted, he was exempt from the mitzvah. But since these children are considered his, and now he's Jewish, now therefore we do go after the majority, sort of retroactively. Meaning, when he wasn't Jewish, he was the father of these children. And that was an assumption, and for Bnei Noach that's not good enough, fine. But those are, in most cases, his children. Now that he became Jewish, we could go and rely on the majority, which means they are his children, his biological children. And even though when it comes to a Jew, yesh cheskas, tzidkas, says, wait a second, there is a difference. When it comes to the Jew, it's not just that most husbands are the fathers of their children. There is a chazaka. There is a very strong assumption that they are law-abiding, proper, if you want, modest, and therefore there is a strong assumption that the father is the father. But when it comes to non-Jews, as a rule, what we would say is that they are promiscuous. And therefore, especially certain nations, like we say that about Mitzrayim, about ancient Egypt, that they're shtufei zima. They are full of incest. So there, why do we have a chazaka? This man was not Jewish. He fathered children. Well, you don't know that he fathered them. You don't know he's really the father. And now he became Jewish. So now you're going to say what? Rely on the majority? But the majority relying on is that when he was not Jewish. Nonetheless, why then did he fulfill the mitzvah? Why then are we accrediting those children to him? However, in the Talmud, in Tractate Chulin, on page 13b, Hamrinan, we say, that the wives will not allow themselves to just be free for all. And therefore, even if you want to make the argument that the non-Jewish men are very sinful in the area of forbidden relations, but the women, the mothers, would not allow someone else to father their children. So therefore, you could rely that he's the father. Ein shama shapilpil ktsas beikar klolin gam bekuntris leididi agoin av bezdin valatisk yishmem trim v'chaskem shevesi bekuntris zel leil b'marechas abeza istalud shakil v'tari bedina roiv imahani b'ben noyach v'chein b'sfek sveka v'chuli ein sham. Okay, now he's giving us another place to look up, where there the discussion is a whole give and take with regards to the majority, whether that does work by Bnei Noyach, and likewise if you have what's called a doubt within a doubt, a double doubt. Okay, so this is basically where we're at now, where we finished this very lengthy piece, which started way back on 3216, about whether there is the rule of Bitul Beroiv, whether it applies to Bnei Noyach or not. And all these various different opinions and the back and forth. Now, the next piece is a short piece. That would be Dalid. That's where we're going to leave off now till next time. So we're on page Aleph Taf Reish Yud, which would be 3219. The left-hand column, right in the middle of the column by the letter Dalit. And that's just one paragraph. And then comes the next piece, which is not very long. So the next pieces are, for the most part, all not too long, especially compared to the one piece that we just did now. So this one was a really long piece, and all the rest are either really short or average. So until next time, wishing everyone all the best and much success in studying and teaching, promoting, and most importantly, of course, observing the God-given commandments known as the 7 Noahide laws, and making this place the world of peace, the world of godliness, as it's meant to be, with the advent of the coming and the complete revelation of our righteous Mashiach now. Thank you.